Hey y'all, it's Megan from Made for Mermaids, and we're sewing up a Finley with contour waistband. If you want to see the crossover waistband, I'll leave it down below. You need to cut two front pieces, mirror images. Make sure to cut on the correct line on top for the crossover or the fold over and contour waistline. You need one gusset piece. You need two lower back pieces. You're going to mark the star on the lower back pieces and on your gusset piece. You need one upper back piece on the fold, and then for the contour band you will need one front waistband, one back waistband, and then one lining front and one lining back. If you're cutting pockets, then you will cut those, and that will be your first step, is to add the pockets. Now it's time to attach the gusset to the back crotch curve. So you're going to match the star with the right sides together of the gusset to the star on one of your lower back pieces. So you will have a tiny little overhang when you match those points. I matched mine just with a pin. You can also use a clip, or you can mark it with some chalk. So you're going to match those points, and then you're going to lay the gusset along the curve, matching the raw edges. And then I like to baste the gusset on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance before I stitch it with my serger, and then stitch it again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to press that seam open, and we're going to attach the other lower back piece. So I'm going to lay that right side out, take the other side and put it right sides together, aligning the raw edges. Again, you want that tiny little overhang. And we're going to start pinning this in place. So the lower portion of that curve is on the gusset, and then it will slowly go in and attach to the other lower back piece. So I'm going to match the top edges and pin. And you can baste this together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. At the top of the triangle gusset, there's going to be a small gap on the raw edges, which I'm going to try to show you here. And that's going to get caught in the seam when you sew it. So when you see that small gap, don't worry about it. Now you can baste this, or you can just go in with your serger. If you're new to adding gussets, or this is your first one, I would definitely baste first, so you make sure that you have the placement correct. Then you will sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can press that seam towards one side and top stitch this if you'd like. Next, we need to attach the upper back piece to the lower back piece. So I'm just finding the center of the upper back, placing a clip there, and then right sides together, I'm going to pin the center of the upper back to the back center seam on the lower back, and then you're going to pin or clip the edges together and ease those curves into place. They should match perfectly, but depending on your fabric, you may need to ease a little bit because they are opposite curves. Once you get everything pinned in place, you will stitch them together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, you can press the seam towards one side and top stitch it if you want. Then you can place that to one side as we work on our front pieces. So you're going to take your two fronts, place them right sides together, and we're going to sew them together along the crotch curve with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now it's time to move to the side seams. So you're going to open those front and back pieces up, place them right sides together, aligning the top and bottom edges, and you're going to stitch them together on each side from the hem to the top waistline edge with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now it's time to stitch the crotches together. So I like to find the center of the gusset by just folding it in half and matching the seams, then placing a clip there. And I'm going to match that center point to the front center seam. And then I like to match the bottom hemlines and then ease the rest of the inseam in place. Again, this should match perfectly, but if you are off a little bit on your seam or cutting, you may need to ease it in. Now we're going to stitch these together on the front and back with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to flip it right side out, and then I'm just going to place a pin at the center back since that upper back portion doesn't have a center seam. And we're going to set that aside and work on our waistband. Now it's time to work on our contour waistband. So you're going to lay the main front and back pieces right sides together, and you're going to sew them on each side, creating the side seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And we're going to do the exact same thing with the lining pieces. So place the front and back lining pieces together and then sew them with a 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side. If you use the same lining and main pieces, note that the lining pieces are smaller than the main pieces. Now you're going to flip your lining piece right side out, and then you're going to slip it inside the main waistband, matching the side seams and aligning the top raw edges. And you are going to stitch this together all along the top with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. When you're done, press the lining toward the wrong side, and you can understitch or top stitch the seam so the lining doesn't peek out over the main pieces. Now it's time to attach the waistband to the bottoms, and you're going to flip the waistband so the lining is right sides out, and you're going to place it over your bottoms. You're going to match the front center notch to the front center seam on your pants or shorts, and then align the side seams and then the back notches to the back center. You don't need to stretch the waistband too much. It should be barely any at all. And then you will stitch the waistband to the pants with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then give it a good press. The last step is to hem the bottom. So you're going to press the hemline towards the wrong side by 1/2 inch and then edge stitch in place. And your Finleys are complete. We hope you love these pants and shorts and that you get a lot of use out of them. If you have any questions, you can leave them down below and I'll try to answer them. As always, if you make a pair of Finleys, we would love to see posted in our Facebook group or tag us on Instagram at Made for Mermaids, #MadeForMermaidsPattern, #Finley Pattern.